Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Core studio. Welcome to the show. So, on today's episode, I am going to be revealing to you 5 commander cards that are actually really good, but no one uses them. Let's jump into it. So, first up, Heartless Summoning. Now, this is a card that I hadn't used for a long time because, well, it wasn't budget friendly, but not because of its use in Commander. This is a card that currently only sees play in 1% of eligible decks out there. A total of, according to EDH Rec, 26,000 decks, yes, but again, out of eligible decks, only 1%. And that percentage should go up a lot because, well, it's an enchantment for just 2 mana in total, 1 a black, and it says, creature spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. And yes, it does have another little, piece of information on there. Creatures you control get -1/-1. Now, when it comes to cards like this, any kind of a minor downside, and yes, it is a downside, tends to scare off a lot of players. And you will be seeing that as maybe something that we see for the rest of the cards on this episode, or at least a couple of the other cards on this episode. A minor downside like this, yes, is a bummer. Oh no, my creatures get slightly smaller, and there are certain decks out there that literally can't utilize that. If it's like, oh, well, I just have a bunch of, 1 power creatures, or 1 toughness creatures, they all get taken out by this. Sure, okay, yeah, don't throw it in a token deck, obviously. Don't throw it in a deck with a bunch of small creatures. But if you, say, have a, tribal deck that has a lot of big creatures, let's just use it as an example on this, episode, dragons. If you got a dragon deck, yeah, this card should be considered for you. Think about Dragon on turn 2 playing this card. Yeah, you're like, okay, cool, all my dragons now cost 3 less to cast. Oh darn, my giant dragons are slightly smaller, but who cares about that? In fact, I probably have some anthems in the deck anyways to make up for that. That being said, I am hypercharging my dragon spells. And of course, it doesn't have to just be for dragon decks, but big creature decks as well, or even just medium-sized creature decks, or just turn 2, all right, play this, and all of a sudden my commander now is 2 cheaper as well. If you've got a 5 mana commander and you just played, land, turn 1 through 3, and this on turn 2, congratulations, your commander is coming out turn 3 for just playing this. It is a crazy good effect. When it comes to other types of cards out there that reduce creature cost this much, there aren't really many out there at all. In fact, there is nearly nothing that is this efficient, essentially. I mean, the closest we have to this, which does see a ton of play in Dragon decks, I think I looked up Dragon with Heartless Summoning. It's only 236 decks in total, which is insane. Because again, how much it can hypercharge it versus an Urza's Incubator, which sees so much play, and yes, it's a very good card. Artifact 4/3, enters the battlefield with a creature type. Creature spells of the chosen type cost 2 less to cast. Yeah, this is, sure, better. I will say, yes, for, specific tribal decks, absolutely is better. I mean, Heartless Summoning is better just in general when it comes to non-specific tribal decks because Urza's Incubator only applies to certain creatures, obviously. That being said, yeah, this does cost 1 mana more. It does cost 1 mana more. It does the exact same thing, and again, say your Dragon deck, without the downside. And yes, it is a downside, but again, a very minor downside when you're like, oh yeah, my dragons have 6 power, 6 toughness. Oh darn, they're down to 5/5s. Oh no. How terrible. Yeah, I mean, this is a mass cost reducer, and there aren't many of these out there at all. And again, Heartless Summoning is technically more efficient being at 2 mana versus 3, so do keep that in mind. Obviously, other ones like, Dragon Lord Servant, 1/3 Goblin Shaman for 2 mana in red. Dragon spells you cast cost 1 to cast. Sees a ton of play in Dragon decks out there, and rightfully so. That being said, I will again argue that Heartless Summoning is much better than this because, well, unless you've got a lot of Goblin synergies in your deck for some reason, your Dragon deck, which you might, I guess, but okay, cool. Yeah, they cost basically the exact same amount, obviously. This is it's a 1/3 creature. Cool. All right, that's more susceptible to removal. Again, when it comes to flimsiness of cards and card types, creatures are the easiest to remove, or I should say the most likely to be removed because of, again, board wipes, which is why Mana Dorks are less, efficient than, say, Land Ramp, essentially. Not efficient, I guess, but hardy. But yes, Dragon Lord Servant, again, can get removed much easier versus an enchantment typically is going to stick and play a lot longer than basically any other permanent type. So yes, they do the exact same thing, except Heartless Summoning does it twice as better, twice as good, but also has a slight downside, but this one can remove much easier I'll take Heartless Summoning in a Dragon deck any day of the week over Dragon Lord Servant. Or how about Herald's Horn? Now, these are two different cards. Obviously, Herald's Horn's a very good card. Artifact for 3, enters battle, choose a creature type. Creature spells the chosen type cost 1 less cast, so like half Urza's Incubator, but obviously there's some additional text here. Beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature card of the chosen type, reveal it in your hand. So this does, obviously, cost reduction and card advantage. That is huge. Heartless Summoning does not do that. That being said, it gives you twice as much cost reduction as this does. So again, when it comes to cards that give cost reduction, there aren't many out there at all, especially ones that are anywhere near this efficient. My goodness, 2 mana reduced by 2. That is massive. That is huge. And being able to just have a slight downside of, again, creature control get -1/-1, who cares? Like, who cares at the end of the day? Again, unless you have, say, again, a deck that is all just tiny creatures, or a tribe that is all tiny creatures, like, yeah, would this work in an Elves deck? No, you don't want to wipe out all your Elves. That being said, a lot of tribes out there are at least medium-sized to large, and yes, it works in any of those, basically. Yeah, dinosaurs, dragons, especially the big ones. But yeah, again, if you just have, like, a Stompy deck, too, yeah, okay, cool, reduce the cost, awesome. Yeah, being able to, again, save mana on all your creatures, including your commanders. Keep in mind, this is basically like paying for 1 commander tax for a commander as well. Yeah, it is such a good card. And again, it sees basically no play. 1% of eligible decks out there. And finally, it is budget friendly with that reprint. So finally can go within my decks as well. Make sure you pick it up today. Next up, Necrologia. Let's stay in the mono black cards for now. Even less decks. According to EDH Rec, 0% of eligible decks out there utilize this card. 9,509 decks in total. Yeah, there's a lot of decks on the EDH Rec site, but still, this card is a gem. An instant for 5 mana in black. Played only during your end step. Okay, alright, so there is a restriction to it, and again, those restrictions, those slight downsides, again, scare away the vast majority of players. Like, well, what if this scenario happens and I don't want that? Okay, well, no, I won't use it then. All right, no. Ignore the downside and think about the upside, all right? Additional cost to cast it, pay an amount of life. Okay, that's a downside as well. That being said, draw cards equal to life paid this way. 1 life for 1 card, you will make that deal any day of the week in Commander. All the time, you will make that deal. Again, you've got 40 life. You literally could go 39. You probably won't do that with this, but still, being able to draw an absurd amount of cards, again, you could very easily, for the right deck out there, be like, yeah, sure, 10 cards, 15 cards, whatever it is. It is a card where you can just dig down into your deck an absurd amount. And of course, there are certain other cards out there that I will kind of reference that are somewhat similar to this that do see a lot more play, and even one that is technically a game changer. So, yeah. This is a card, though, that says, you know what? Okay, make an investment. It has to be at this specific time. And yes, that means that unless you've got no maximum hand size, you are still reducing down to 7 cards. That being said, let's say you've got, 3 or 4 cards in your hand. Okay, you got 3 or 4 cards in your hand. You've cast this. Awesome, all right? Now you're like, okay, I'll draw 10 cards. You get to curate the best 10 card hand out of those, 10 card hand, 7 card hand out of those 14 cards. Out of those no new 10 cards that you're getting, you're like, okay, cool. I curate the best new hand out of a ton of cards. It's kind of like a mini mass tutor in a way for you. You can dig down into your deck, especially for certain decks out there that are like life gain strategies. Yes, you should be using this. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm at 100 life. Awesome. All right. Yeah, I'll dig down 40 cards. Sure, why not? Yeah, you are losing out on all of those cards you have to discard. But of course, there are certain cards like, that have flashback or things that you can get out of your graveyard, or certain strategies that actually want things in their graveyard, like reanimation strategies. But still, it doesn't even matter because you are just curating the best 7 card hand out of a ton of cards. You are digging down so deep and replacing bad cards in your hand. It's like a mass, draw loot wheel kind of thing that is just absurdly good. It is a card that can definitely win you the game, especially in certain circumstances too. I mean, just think about a Psychosis Crawler type play. How many decks out there utilize Psychosis Crawler? A ton. It is such a cool card, right? Hey, draw a card. Each opponent loses life every single time you draw a card. Or Shieldred. Yeah, that too. All of a sudden you just cast this and you're like, oh wait, I'm at more life than my opponents are, and I've got Psychosis Crawler in play. Okay, the highest life total opponent has is 20. All right, I'll draw 20 cards. All right, you all lose. Cool. Yeah, good playing with you. Yeah, no, it is a potential combo card. It is a dig down deep card. It is an absurdly efficient card. And again, if you have no maximum hand size, it's just draw an absurd amount of cards, however many you need. When it comes to comparable cards, obviously, well, Necropotence. Yeah. Enchantment for 3 mana in black. Skip your draw step. Whenever discard a card, exile from your graveyard, pay 1 life, exile the top card of your library face down, put that card in your hand at the beginning of your next end step. It's kind of around the same thing-ish. I mean, they basically have the same name, you know, essentially, right? Necrologia, Necropotence, somewhat similar. But yeah, this one is basically like a permanent effect on the field. It's also one that should be on the Game Changers list. I don't know how Wizards was like, no, this isn't a Game Changer, but you know what is? Glacial Chasm! Yeah! Okay, Wizards, calm down. Yeah, stop eating those sugar packets. Yeah, so this is just absolutely a very, very, very good card. Obviously, it does cost less. It does stay in play. You don't have to skip your draw step as well. I'm not trying to, you know, knock on Necropotence. It's an incredibly powerful, overpowered card. That being said, yeah, Necrologia is a very good kind of one-off effect of it that just gets slept on for whatever reason. I mean, obviously, Ad Nauseam is somewhat comparable as well, and this is on the Game Changers list. Instant for 5 mana. Peel the top card of your library, put that card in your hand. You lose life, yields convert mana cost. You may repeat this process any number of times. This one is adjustable in that, okay, like, oh, it's a land on top. Cool, that's free for me to put in my hand. Great, good for me. Obviously, if you've got a bunch of low mana value cards in your deck, cool. And obviously, if you've got some bigger mana value cards that you hit, you're like, I can still pay 8 life for that. Yeah, there are going to be times when you're drawing more cards with this versus with, you know, Necrologia. That being said, the main difference in these two cards and why this is a game changer and Necrologia isn't is because, well, you can cast this whenever you want. You're limited Necrologia to your end step, meaning that, again, you're most likely not keeping those cards. I mean, keeping all the cards, I should say, right? Unlike Ad Nauseam, which you can. That being said, Necrologia, while it's not Ad Nauseam, is still incredibly powerful, and it is incredibly slept on, and people do not use it for whatever reason. Again, according to EDH Rec, just 9,509 decks, 0% of eligible decks out there, and it should be seeing a lot more play. It is such a good card. Do you have Psychosis Card in your deck? Consider this card. It is a combo with it. Just consider it because of that. If you have a life gain strategy, what's, paying 40 life to draw 40 cards? Just do it. I know players then feel bad. It's like, well, I wanted to draw those cards, and then now they're in my graveyard and I can't get them back. It's like, okay, well, you just got the best 7 cards out of the top 40 of your library. What else do you need? You can win the game now. Go win the game with this card, please. Next up, perhaps the most surprising one for me on this list. Every single time I look up the play of this card, I expect it to go up, and it doesn't. Players have not caught on to Edge of Autumn, and I don't know how. 1% of eligible decks out there, 17,868 decks to its name. Again, when it comes to cards having a slight downside to them, players just run for the hills and say, no, I want the sure thing. I'd rather have the safe option. I just can't handle any kind of, slight downside that this card might have. What if this situation happens? What if this very specific situation happens and I can't use it? No! Sorcery for 1 and a green. If you control 4 or fewer lands, search your library, basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle your library. Cycling, sacrifice a land. Okay, so this one is, again, the situation where you're at, oh darn, I'm at 5 lands. I can't cast this. This is a terrible garbage card. Why did I include this in my deck? This is the worst thing of all time. Okay, yeah, but on turns 1 through 4, when you really want to ramp, essentially, right? When you have, 4 or fewer lands, when you really, really, really need to ramp, for the vast majority of decks out there, this is Rampant Growth. Actually, this is slightly better Rampant Growth because you could sacrifice a land if you need to, but you're not going to do that early anyways. But this is Rampant Growth, which is one of the most played cards of all time in the history of Commander. It will always be, basically, until 10 years from now when they're like, Rampant Growth for 1 mana because power creep. Yes, this is an incredibly good card. And later in the game, it is much better than Rampant Growth. When you've got 8 lands in play, you're not like, oh, well, thank goodness I drew a Rampant Growth. Now I can cast that and get my 9th land. Yay, I really needed that. No, you're like, oh, I drew a Rampant Growth. I don't exactly need to draw that. I don't really have much else to do right now. I really wish this was a different card. Congratulations, with Edge of Autumn, it can be a different card. You cycle it away by sacrificing a land. Oh darn, I went down a land, but I drew a much better card that I need in this situation. If again, okay, top deck, late game, you're like, oh no, I'm gonna lose the game unless I draw something. A Rampant Growth. you lost the game. Edge of Autumn, you didn't lose the game. Just tap that land for mana, sacrifice that land, and draw something potentially better that can save you. Edge of Autumn, again, is the exact same thing as Rampant Growth when you want it to be early in the game. Mid-game, okay, like in like 2 turns when you're like, oh darn, I wish I could just cast this, but I can't. Sure, there's going to be a downside to it where you're like, oh no, this is the worst thing ever. It's not the worst thing ever. You're going to get over it. It's okay. But then, you know what? Later in the game, it is so much better than Rampant Growth. So again, a slight downside where it can be a potentially dead draw when you have exactly 5 lands and you're like, oh no, I really needed that 6th land. Did you? Yeah, this is a card that I just cannot believe. Again, Rampant Growth, one of those played cards of all time. It's the exact same thing early on. Go get that basic land to play, tap for 2 mana. Ramping at 2 mana by lands in Commander is exactly what you want. My goodness. Search for Tomorrow. Crazy good card. I love it. It's a great card. I'm not trying to say that it's not a great card. I am saying that this also has a downside to it. Sorcery for 3 mana in green. Search library base land for the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Suspend 2 for a single green mana. So if it is in your opening hand, great. That's awesome. That's amazing. Suspend 2 for a single green mana, turn 1. Awesome. You get to cast it for free later, land to play untapped. That's great. That's incredible. That's awesome. What if it's not in your opening hand? What if it's not your first, card that you draw? Which most of the time it's not going to be, right? Oh, well then, yeah, I wish I'd rather have Edge of Autumn drawing this off the top of the library essentially on turn 3. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so again, this is a card that does have a downside as well, technically, because it does cost 1 more mana than your typical Rampant Growth. Yes, you get that mana back in a way by the land coming to play untapped, but still, being able to play on turn 2 and ramp on turn 2 is better than on turn 3. Roiling Regrowth, a card that is not Harrow. It is very good still, but it's not quite Harrow. For landfall decks, it's very good, obviously. Instant for 3 mana, sacrifice a land, go get 2 basics, put them on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Exact same thing as Harrow, but those basics can play tapped. So again, costs you 3 mana to do. You're still only going up 1 land, but it is better for fixing in general. But it's still late game, it doesn't have that flexibility where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I didn't really care about drawing a Roiling Regrowth on turn 12. That's not good. So yeah, again, Edge of Autumn, better later in the game. Yeah, much better. And of course, Cultivate, everyone's favorite. I do like Cultivate as well. But still, when it comes to like what I'd rather have in my opening hand typically, I'd rather take the 2 mana ramp spell than the 3 mana ramp spell. Yes, I know you get to, go get another land that you can like hit your land drop still, but like I'd rather ramp quicker, earlier. Quicker and earlier is almost always better in my opinion. Screamloom Druid, very good obviously when it comes to like ETB creature decks, but still like, I can guarantee you there are decks out there that are utilizing Screamloom Druid that should be utilizing Edge of Autumn instead. So there you go. Enter the battlefield, basically again, Roiling Regrowth. So yeah, nothing against Roiling Regrowth, but like, Edge of Autumn, better in my opinion. Again, it is a Rampant Growth early when you need it the most. In late game, it's better than Rampant Growth. Consider it. People, please. It is 22 cents and it is an incredible card. It is land ramp in Commander. What's not to love about it? Slight downside. Slight. Don't let it scare you away. Go get it now. Next up, one that I will never understand. It does not see more play in Commander. Oblation. 23,318 decks to its name. Just 1% of eligible decks out there utilize this card. And it's not like it's like specific in what it does. Like it's not like, oh well, it's like an edge case kind of card where like you only use it in certain situations. No, this is like always a good card basically. Okay? Instant for 3 mana in white. The owner of target non-land permanent shuffles it into their library, then draws 2 cards. Okay, so here's the thing. Shuffling is, in my opinion, basically the exact same thing as exiling. They ain't getting that card back. They are not getting that card back. It is going to be gone basically forever. Sure, there are going to be times where they get lucky and they redraw it, or if they have a tutor and they really want to go get that card, cool. They go and waste that tutor, not waste the tutor, but use the tutor to go do that. It essentially, getting rid of someone's card by shuffling is nearly the same thing as exile. It's just gone. You ain't getting it back, okay? So, yes, there is a downside to the card, though, where you give the player 2 cards. And that is something that sends players running for the hills. How could I give my opponent card advantage? Oh, I can't do it. No, it's impossible. Okay, would you rather them have that giant Eldrazi that's going to be swinging at you, annihilating your things? Or, yeah, give them 2 cards. Yeah, give them 2 cards. This is a card that is also flexible, and that you might not realize that this can be a great way for you to draw 2 cards when you need it. This is divination essentially for you at instant speed. I can't remember the new divination instant speed is the new power creep card, but still, like, basically the exact same thing as that, except for, okay, I've got to get rid of one of my things. Yeah, I've got like this like little like clue token out there, or I've got like this treasure token, or I've got like a 1/1 servo. Okay, goodbye. I'll take 2 cards. Thank you. Yeah, this is a card that basically, again, is a great way to say, hey, I need 2 cards. I'm willing to get rid of one of my things for 2 cards, like Village Right style, essentially. But also it can be removal for an opponent's thing that, again, like permanently gets rid of that. So it is removal. It is potential card advantage. It is worth the slight downside of the card. And players do not like any kind of downsides. Be okay with downsides, okay? Be okay with that slight downside, because the upside of this card is it saves you in basically any situation, except for it's a, you know, land card that you need to get rid of. And it's like, well, I can't get rid of that land card. Oh, darn, Guy's Cradle, no. Yeah, that's like the same for most removal out there. Okay, when it comes to things like D-Spark, a great card, absolutely. Again, limited to Orzhov, though, and a lot of these are going to be like, okay, you need 2 colors versus just the 1. Oblation can fit into more decks out there. Instant for 2 mana, exile target permanent mana value 4 or greater. Again, it is more specific. It is even more specific than Oblation is, right? Oblation can get rid of more things. This is not also getting rid of lands, because there aren't lands out there that cost 4 or greater, right, basically. And also, again, this is restricted to 4 or greater. Are there going to be times when it's like, oh no, I really need to get rid of that 3 mana Rhystic Study. I can't do it. Oblation can do it. So keep that in mind. I'm not saying that it's just strictly better than D-Spark, but like it is a card that is, again, more flexible than D-Spark. I would use it over D-Spark in a lot of situations, and it is just a very good card. It costs 1 more, sure, but it's also less specific mana as well, so it's technically easier to cast. Anguish Unmaking, very good card, obviously. Exile target non-land permanent, again, not a land. You can't get rid of lands either with this. You lose 3 life. Again, shuffling, exiling, in my opinion, basically the exact same thing. There's a slight downside in this card too. 3 life, though, versus 2 cards. Yes, you'd rather just lose the 3 life than give someone else 2 cards in the vast majority of situations out there. That being said, it also doesn't have the flexibility to give you card advantage when you need it as well. And it's harder to cast, and it doesn't fit in as many decks. I'm not saying it's just strictly better. I'm just saying that there are, yes, downsides to each, but also there are upsides with Oblation that Anguish Unmaking doesn't have. Utter End sees a good amount of play, so I think it's in like 7% of eligible decks. Instant for 4 mana, exile target non-land permanent. It costs 1 more than Oblation. It costs an extra mana that you have to hold up for it, and it's got no flexibility to it. Yeah, there's no technical downside. You're not losing life. You're not giving someone else cards, but again, you don't have flexibility with the card. And yes, again, it's harder for you to cast because it's more mana and you need that black pip as well. Oblation is a crazy good card. Again, it is needed card advantage if you need it, or it is removal. Yes, there's a slight downside, but again, if it's like, oh, okay, that player has Smothering Tithe in play, am I going to be okay with giving them 2 cards to get rid of Smothering Tithe? Yes. Yes, I'm going to be okay with doing that. Oblation is such a good card. Go pick it up right now. And finally, Reins of Power. I love this card. It is such a cool card. It has won me so many games, and it is a card that players just don't play for some reason. 1% of eligible decks out there for this game-ending flexible card. 25,262 decks to its name. Yeah, it should be a lot more than that. So, this is a card that is an instant for 4 mana in blue. Untap all creatures you control and all the creatures target opponent controls. You and that opponent each gain control of all creatures the other controls will have turn. Those creatures gain haste will have turn. I mean, when it comes to like the cards I've talked to on this episode, all of them have had slight downsides. I guess the slight downside of this one is your opponent gets to touch your cards with their Cheeto hands. It's probably the downside of it, right? Basically. I mean, sure, if that opponent has like instant speed, like I mass sacrifice my army, sure, yeah, that very specific scenario, you could get got with that, but that's not going to happen, number 1. Number 2, the amount of times you can get other people with this card and just win the game is insane. This is a card that is just so much fun to pull off with, because it is basically like that player's got a commanding army over there. I can basically just win the game right now. I mean, not necessarily just win. I mean, I can win the game sometimes with it too. If like you literally don't have an army and an opponent has an army, it's just one-on-one that scenario. You're like, okay, I steal your army. Okay, I swing at you with your army. You lose. That's the most fun scenario of all time, when that player just thinks that they're in the driver's seat and you just take it from them and say, oh, thanks for building up this army. You lose. Or, if you give the army the Feldergrip. I love this card in Feldergrip, but other decks as well. This is a card that is flexible in so many ways. Picture this scenario, okay? An opponent is swinging at you with their massive army. You're like, oh no, that army's coming at me. Okay, well, I don't really have any defenses right now. I'll gain control of your army. What? Yeah, I'll gain control of your army. It's my army now. Okay, well, how does that work? Judge? Okay, well, technically, if an attacking creature changes controllers, it basically takes it out of combat. So this is a fog. Okay, this is a fog if you need it. It's a desperation fog, but it can be even better than that, of course, because same scenario. Let's say that opponent is attacking me with their army. Okay, well, that's player B. Player C has an even bigger army, but they're just sitting there and be like, oh, the player's getting attacked. Okay, well, I take player C's army and give them my army, which they can do nothing with, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I block with player C's creatures and decimate player B's army, and also make it so that player C's creatures, probably block improperly, so they die as well. So I just wiped out 2 armies for paying 4 mana and having no downside to it. Okay, so this is an offensive card, a defensive card, a game-ending card. What else do you want out of it? It literally is basically so many things all in one. When it comes to comparable cards, there really aren't many out there at all, because it's like a weird, gotcha trick card that also can just win you the game. I mean, it's basically like Insurrection in a certain way as well. It's okay. Insurrection's a bit different, but it costs a lot more mana. It's not instant speed. Charge for 8 mana in total in red. Untapable creatures gain control of them until end of turn. They gain haste all of turn. It is a I win the game kind of a card. I steal the creatures and I swing and I win. In this same scenario with Reins of Power, if you're in a one-on-one scenario, it's kind of the exact same thing if you don't really have a big army anyways. It is a card that's like, okay, what's the biggest army out there that can just win me the game? Cool, I take that. It is my army now. Thank you so much. It's also kind of in a way, and it's not the same thing, I know, Teferi's Protection. It's like, okay, it's like, get me out of jail free card type card. Until end of turn, your life total can't change, gain protection for anything, all purge control phase out, exile it. Yeah, this does a lot of other things, obviously, but again, it's kind of like a gotcha card in a way where it's like, oh, you thought I was at a disadvantage right now and this is going to hurt me? No. In fact, I'm turning everything around. Teferi's Protection is more like I leave and everything's okay. Reins of Power is like, oh, you have really good creatures over there? I take them. They're mine now. I block with them, and now both of you are all decimated. It's great. So it's offensive, it's defensive, it's all the things that you want. It is an amazing card. Go pick it up right now. It's budget friendly, just around $1, and try it out for yourself and just see how many games it wins you, how many times it saves you. It is an amazing card. So now as this episode is wrapping up again, there are amazing cards out there that still see no play at all basically in Commander, and they deserve to. Heartless Summoning again, massive reduction for your creatures. Slight downside, sure, are you going to play in your Elves deck? No, but if you're like, oh, I've got a bunch of 4/4s in this deck, cool. Now they're slightly smaller at 3/3s, was it worth getting them out a lot quicker? Absolutely. Or again, like dragons, oh no, my 6/6 dragons are 5/5s, how terrible, but I got them out so much faster. Again, just think about how many more dragons you can get out with an Dragon deck out there. Dragon, this sees again, 237 decks. That's all it's being played in for Dragon. Go pick it up now. Your dragons come out so much quicker. Necrologia, again, massive card advantage out of nowhere. I mean, at your end step, sure. But yes, being able to be like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I've got 2 cards in my hand. All right, now I drew, 15 cards, and I can get the best cards in my hand out of those, next 15, essentially, right? Just curate your best hand, or if you've got my expand size, great, or if you got Psychosis Crawler in, win the game. There you go. Edge of Autumn, I'll never understand this one. It is a rampant growth, but it can also be better, again, later in the game when you don't need to ramp. It's like, okay, cool, yeah, I'll sacrifice a land, whatever, no big deal at all. And all of a sudden, oh, okay, cool, yeah, I get a better card that actually helps me out. Oblation, slight downside, but get rid of the most threatening thing on the board, basically permanently. And then also, if you need to draw those cards, it is flexible so you can draw those cards. Anguish and Making doesn't have that for you. I'm not saying it's better than Anguish and Making, but it is flexible. Reins of Power, game ender / game protector / amazing, awesome card. Pick these cards up right now and go test them out for yourselves. They're amazing. And with that, this episode is come to a close. Make sure you comment below with your thoughts on it. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.